Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rob Emmett, and I'm a video director and editor and the owner of a video production company called Win-Win Productions. And today, however, I'm producing and facilitating this webinar with some colleagues whom I'll introduce in a moment. Now, these panelists are specialists in different areas of business, and they're going to unpack some ideas that we think are important for business people like yourselves to know. Now, a lot has changed quickly in this country, and businesses need to learn not only how to work through a global pandemic and massive economic disruption, but also how to set up for a successful recovery. And we're creating a few webinars this week on different topics. The first was yesterday, it was on cash flows. And this, the second in our series, is about recreating a successful workplace culture, which may be more difficult than you think. We'll have a brief introduction about this topic from our featured panelist, Erlain, and then the three panelists will unpack it for us. Now, we're not taking live questions in these webinars. However, I will pass on your questions to the panelists, and they'll get back to you by email. So when you ask a question to a specific panelist, please be sure to include their name in your question so I can send it on to them after the webinar. And to type in a question, just open up the Q&A panel using the Q&A icon in your Zoom menu. And you'll also be able to like and comment on other viewers' questions there as well. So right now, I'd like to just introduce our panelists first of all. And so first, our Jennifer Denil is owner of JD Financial Associates. She is a certified public accountant who provides fractional financial controller services to closely held businesses. Jennifer assists her clients with understanding cash flows, increasing profitability, and identifying cost savings from operational efficiencies. Her clients benefit from her 30 years of financial experience without the cost commitment of a full-time employee. And most recently, she has assisted many companies of varying sizes with navigating the CARES Act funding opportunities. Next is Andrew Bell, who's our featured panelist today. He's a tax, estate planning, and transactional attorney with Schoenberg, Finkel, Newman, and Rosenberg, LLC in Chicago. He assists closely held business clients with their succession planning, provides tax analysis as part of the firm's transactional practice, as well as prepares estate and gift tax returns and maintains a sophisticated corporate practice as well. I'm sorry, Mary is our featured speaker today. Mary Erlain is our featured speaker. Apologize for that. She is the founder of Peak Development Strategies. She believes an organization's foundation is their people, their employees, management, and owners. She is a published author of business books. Her most recent books address the opportunities and challenges of the multi-generational workforce, which we'll be talking about today. Generational diversity is a root cause of many of the problems in business today that affect growth, productivity, and profitability. Mary says, as the constraints of doing business ease due to the pandemic, don't forget your people. She believes that a culture needs to be rebuilt in order for a business to sustain itself going forward. So today's topic is don't forget your people. Mary will start us off with a brief overview of the topic, and then we'll open it up for a whole panel discussion, unpacking the ideas, adding from their different areas of expertise, and then we'll wrap it up in about half an hour. So let's begin. Mary is unmuted. And Mary, what are some effects of this shutdown on workplace culture, and what are some things that companies need to think about right now to re-engage their people when we start to go back to work?
I'll answer that question, but first I want to thank you for doing all the heavy lifting, creating these webinars, and I also want to thank my colleagues, Jennifer and Andrew. This has been very enjoyable working together. So what have been the changes? Well, you know, shelter in place, at least here in Illinois, and other states that have a similar order, has had a significant effect on the culture. Let me define culture first. I think everyone has their own idea of it, but let me kind of give the, the clinical or the common definition of that. And that is what the cultural norms, define what's encouraged, discouraged, accepted, and rejected. Great examples of how we define culture, common words such as hardworking, honesty, integrity. So words like that end up shaping attitudes and behaviors. In this current situation, what's happened is the culture in essence, has been fractured. People have been forced to work from homes, or, if they are in a workplace, they're distancing the way they're able to work, the PPE, the protective gear they have to wear. This has changed and reshaped attitudes and behaviors. So what I see is, typically we don't know what recovery is in reentry is going to look like yet. In the state of Illinois, we have a May 31st deadline, but as happened previous times, those have been extended. We don't know what the stipulations are going to be as industries open. So right now, people are living kind of in a limbo state. And it's significantly affecting people because how we are all responding to the change in the way we work is unique as our thumbprints. This is not unheard of. In an individual business, you can have impact on culture, such as a business sale, the loss of a key leader. And that can have a profoundly positive impact or a negative impact. Right now, in organizations, I have seen both sides. I've seen both sides of that. I'm working with an organization that had a contingency plan in place, and they're not skipping a beat working together. And in reality, it's proven to this group of people that they are stronger than this pandemic. And then there are those that are struggling. So right now, what I see is a focus on the finances, very much as Jennifer was speaking about in our first webinar. It's all around the acronyms of PPP, EIDL, your P&L, all of that, and that absolutely is important. What's overlooked is the people, and I say don't forget the people, and we'll unpack that in a few moments. And another area that's of passion to me is the books I've written on the 5 generations in the workplace. I said in the first book that in about a decade or so, the workplace was going to change drastically. Never in my wildest dreams did I think a pandemic would be the place that change actually took place. And what I'd like to say about that briefly is that to our traditionalists, those folks born just prior to World War II, and our baby boomers, they had this thing called the Depression, or the influence of the Depression. So when we're talking about a pandemic that is taking place over weeks or months, the Depression was well more than a decade long. And when I consider the tenacity of those generations as they persevered and came out of such a global event, they bring something to the table. In addition, we also have our younger generations who are typically more agile in technology, who have embraced this work at home. So I see these 5 generations being able to bring this reentry and recovery. I see them bringing their own skills and experience, and how is it that we can build bridges together to redefine what the workplace is going to look like going forward.
So Mary, are you seeing differences in how the different generations are dealing with what's going on right now?
Yes, there are those that are saying, finally, I get to work from home. Finally, I can prove to my boss that I can be as effective working from home as I am working in that cubicle or that office. And then there, I guess the bookends of this are the other end of the spectrum of people saying, I can't wait to get back, to my clients, and, to be with my people, and to be around the water cooler, and I think any point in between. I think some of that has a generational influence, but I think it's also very, very individual. And I think our own personality dimensions, aside from our age, how much we really need the company of people, and how capable we are of working on our own as part of a team. I think it's a very, very complex answer to what seems to be a simple answer, but it really isn't. I think it's as individual as who we are.
Interesting. One thing that we had spoken about previously was the older generation being so used to going to an office and seeing people at their desks every day, and having that giving them comfort or confidence that people are doing their jobs every day. And now they don't have that control. They're not able to see their people working. And Andrew, I think you had mentioned that some of your associates were struggling with having confidence that people were doing what they were supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say that it's a concern for anyone when the office culture isn't in place. There's a lot to be said. I think, Mary, you've spoken about this. We take a lot of our behavior derives from social cues, meaning the commute, the sitting at the desk, the 10-15 coffee break, et cetera. And there have been articles written, all sorts of news sources about how our sense of time is being disrupted, and it's causing some inefficiencies because of that. So I think that's kind of I think it's unique to the situation. My question is, there certainly is always going to be a push-pull between generations when it comes to technology. The younger one is almost always going to be at the forefront or more along the curve than the older one. And I think this circumstance has forced everyone to jump along that learning curve. The question is then, how many organizations, or how does an organization take the good from this? Meaning, to me, that means work flexibility in terms of hours, in terms of location, and weed out the negatives, which I would say are going to be as Jen pointed out, maybe a lack of trust or accountability. Maybe not trust isn't the right word, but accountability when you don't actually see the person physically in the office. How do you see that being navigated going forward?
Well, that would be, I think what's necessary now, and is to do your basic SWOT analysis of your organization. Now, to speak to both of your points, strengths and weaknesses are internal in an organization. So if you didn't know what your weaknesses were prior to this pandemic, I can pretty much guarantee they're probably very transparent and on the surface. But oftentimes it just seems like our fears and all the content that's happening around us in the news and all that seems to have us focused on the negative. Well, spend some time and look at what the strengths were. So when we're speaking directly about accountability and work being completed and how do we know what people are doing, that's part of the SWOT. Take a look at what that was prior when people were in the office, whatever that meant. So take a snapshot, and if you're working with Jennifer Denil, you would have absolutely wonderful analytics on that, but do the best you can, and then take a look, take your emotions, set it aside, and take a real honest look at what productivity was, accountability, errors, deadlines missed, you name it. Take a look at that and reflect and compare and contrast what the results were. Because sadly, if we take a look at the SWOT, the other side of it is opportunities and threats external. But if we take the emotion and we take the opinion out of it and actually look at the data, you can understand, is there a generational influence in there? Do we have the technology in place in order to help this group work together? Do we have the right workflows in place? All of that will unfold. And that's where I think being very strategic and tactical during this period of time, like through whatever remaining shelter in place, is an opportunity to be able to have these conversations. So I think that's where it will help you marry the culture and the strategy together, and also help you put a plan together for what reentry and recovery looks like for your organization, not what the organization next door or your competition is doing, but what's best for your people.
So one thing I just wanted to point out, when you're looking at efficiencies, at least from my perspective, you may have some people that would be hesitant to, maybe before they would be hesitant to shift the way they work so that working from home or working remotely was easier. And they'll point like, oh, during COVID, we let people work remotely and, sales were down 30%. I think some consideration has to be made for the fact that the whole economy has taken a step back, and maybe, the drop, you're going to have to use a control, when times come back, you're going to have to give, I think, more than lip service to examining a work from home policy when the times are good. And certainly you're not anticipating people never being in the office, but there's got to be, I think there's some sort of happy medium. I mean, there's a lot to be said for face-to-face interaction, right? I think across any generation, speaking from the, a slightly younger group of people, I know everyone thinks that we're on our phones 24/7, but we all agree there is something indeed valuable about being able to look someone in the eye, even outside of a Zoom call, read their body language. So I don't really see the office environment going away necessarily, but like we were talking on Jennifer's call, there's a way to make your organization more cost efficient by reducing maybe hard office space, or a fixed office space. Are you seeing people that willing to adapt now for when the pandemic ends, as in they're already taking the lessons and applying it to their organizational structure or their culture? Or can you speak to that at all?
Well, I think, for one thing, when we say don't forget your people, is perhaps get their feedback. Help them share what the good, the bad, and the ugly. Give them that place to vent. And I think right off the bat, that is another way to bring some cohesion back in the workforce. As far as turning the company upside down, moving to a small space, doing hoteling, laying off a whole bunch of people, so on and so forth, your employees have already gone through a bunch. I had in one of my networking group meetings this morning, there is a CPA whose daughter just graduated nursing school, and she is dead in the middle of the COVID response inside a hospital, and she comes home every day. I've got, another individual who was directly affected through the illness. We have people, I was speaking to somebody this morning who seems to be totally focused on the fear side and the political side. So all of those people, types of people, are working for you. So to then impress upon them another change that may help the bottom line, but is it going to literally implode your employees? At the end of the day, if you implode your employees, the bottom line doesn't really much matter. So it's finding that delicate balance of what's best for the company, but also not forgetting the company is your people. So There is no one size fits all. I'm seeing it literally across the board. There's a manufacturer out in the south suburbs. The company has not missed a beat. This is get your hands dirty kind of manufacturing, and they've been plugging and chugging going forward. But they've invested a ton in their people. I've been working with this organization for a while, so they've been professionally developed to work together as a team, and I think they have, more of a cushion underneath them. So to answer the question, it's really investing in the people. We don't want to reduce sales and marketing, but this is the time to invest in some professional development. You may be, as a business owner, be cut out to do it, but sometimes that stranger's voice, they can hear it better. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, and it gave rise to about 7 new ones, so if you bear with me. So what I was thinking is maybe the shift away from the bottom line and maybe looking at this, business owners looking at this as an opportunity to shift their culture, because you are essentially blowing everything up. You're going to have a chance, I think, to put it back together. Mm-hmm. And I think it's rare that in an organization that you have a seismic shift, an external seismic shift, for lack of a better term, a disruptor like this, that kind of, I think, at least in my opinion, you have the opportunity to bring the company closer together, depending on, our clients being in the mid-market, you have a much more personal, hands-on approach than maybe Amazon does with their employees. And I think this is a chance from an employee's perspective. I think they're really watching on what owners are doing and how that is, when things get back to normal, who's being loyal to what companies when the faucet gets turned back on. And I think you're going to see, and maybe you disagree, there are people that are going to have weathered the storm and come out a lot stronger because they did not alienate their workers during this tough time, and others that did. And I think you're going to see a potential flow of human capital in the marketplace, 3 to 6 months after this is done. So more of an observation, I guess, than a question.
Well, couple points on that. You're right. The culture is not going to be the same as what you had in the 1st of March or the 1st of January. But you do have an opportunity to rebuild the culture. So I suggest you take an active role in doing that, or it will develop itself. So it is absolutely an opportunity. You're not necessarily starting from scratch, but you can mold it. And then to the point of there being talent available in the market right now, you can actually, with some great hiring skills, develop the culture by bringing in some of that key talent that you could not find in 2019 with the unemployment rate so low. So you may also consider doing some strategic hires so that they can become kind of the cornerstones of how you want to define the culture, the organization, and your strategy going forward. One more comment: the strategic plan you had in January, you might as well throw it out the window, because that's another area. The old adage says culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, the pandemic kind of ate the strategy too. So that's another area that you need to focus on, and that's where folks like Jennifer and myself become a great left and right hand in considering what that is going forward.
I've never heard that saying. I love that. That's so true. Looking back over my career, you were talking, Mary, about maybe now's not a good time to turn things upside down, make a lot of change, but change is kind of inherently happening at the same time. How do you think that affects companies' organization charts? Do you think this is an opportunity to make changes, reassign job duties, reassign the structure, or make plans for something like that, or just leave it be for now and try and keep people moving forward at this point?
That would probably be an exercise on the other side of SWOT, because now you kind of have the data and you're understanding how you're going to move forward. And absolutely, you know, the receptionist that sat at the front door, there may not be a front door. So, you know, reassigning and taking a look at the job descriptions, taking a look at performance reviews, all of that needs to be reviewed at the very least, but I'm pretty sure revised. So take a look at your pool of talent, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, you know, perhaps cut back employees on the business, but be very careful. And I have an attorney, you know, on the line. Be very careful, because employment law, you can't just like get rid of all the old people because they were fumbling with Zoom. There are employment laws, so definitely look at the compliance and look at the legal side of calling any of the members of staff. So again, just as you said yesterday, Jennifer, don't try to do this alone. Get some professional advisors when you are looking at, you know, reshaping what your organization looks like, and when it comes to the staff, so that you don't end up in a place where, you know, you end up with a lawsuit or you know, anything like that. So don't try to do it alone.
And I think so many times business owners or key managers are so involved in the day-to-day operations of an organization that they're not able to see the forest through the trees. And bringing in someone like you can help them to see things that are going on that they are not even aware of, are detrimental to the culture and the operations.
Yeah, just finishing up an organizational assessment on a nonprofit, and I'm pretty sure we're with the results, which are extremely positive, but there are some gaps that we've defined. I'm sure we're probably going to turn a few heads, you know, when the report is put, you know, into their hands. You know, they're not things that are going to take them down, but there are definitely areas, opportunities, if you will, to work on those gaps and make them stronger. So we see the blind spots. You know, we all see the blind spots. That's in essence the three of us. We just see different blind spots.
If I could ask more of a global question, Mary, we talk about re-engaging and, you know, bringing people, you know, back into the fold. What are some suggestions that business owners can do to actually implement that?
So
after the crisis?
Define. So are we talking tactical type things that they can do?
Yeah, so you've got, you know, day one, everyone's back in the office, or
Okay.
maybe in the lead up to day one. How, you know,
So
how does that look?
Prior to day one, if it's a larger organization, I would suggest that immediate supervisors begin to have a conversation to test the waters, you know, a scripted conversation. We're thinking of reopening on, you know, the whatever day of whatever month that is, and test the emotions, test, you know, what kind of fears, what kind of anticipation, you know, test whether this employee is ready to go. If it was like my phone call I had earlier, that you know, you may have somebody who is very hesitant. And that's okay. And there's no criticism there. It's understanding how the people feel about coming back to work. Because if they're not ready to come back to work, it's okay. We just need to maybe sit back and re-strategize as to this is a valuable individual. They're not ready to come back to the office. What is it we can do for them? So it's no criticism when people have, fears or have been in the news and in perhaps more fearful or perhaps directly affected. We need to have conversations sooner rather than later. And understand that you may be ready, you may be eager, but you may be forcing something that may end up crippling your organization. So even though the day is that we can open, that may not be the day you should open. It comes down to a strategic decision and maybe being a little bit more thoughtful. And that's why I'm saying not necessarily looking at the bottom line, but looking at the personalities and how this has affected people. I shared earlier, there's no criticism over somebody who is nervous about that. That's perfectly fine. And then there are those people that, aren't. That's what I'm saying. This has individually affected people in profound ways, and we can't lose sight of that as part of our organization. And it is somehow finding what that path is for your company that may not necessarily run a parallel to what our governor decides going forward. So it's a tough place.
Thank you.
Yeah, it certainly is a tough place. I heard somebody say we're in the same storm, but not necessarily in the same boat.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. And you know what? Not wrong, just different. Just like my books say, not wrong, just different.
As a rule, I rarely use the word wrong because I find it can be taken very offensively. It's different.
Right.
All right. Well, that takes us to the end of our time today. And I want to thank all of our panelists and all of our guests. And we do have one more webinar in this series on Monday at 2 p.m. Andrew will be our featured panelist. He'll give us an overview of how business owners should think about succession planning in this economy and how the shutdown alters the landscape of mergers and acquisitions. And then the panel will discuss that just like we did today. And lastly, if you have questions about creating video content during the shutdown to keep in touch with clients, creating video to promote your business on social media, or if you'd like help facilitating webinars like this one, you can contact me if you'd like to talk more. And also you can take a look at my website through the link in a follow-up email I'll send. I'm Rob Emmett with Win-Win Productions. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. We hope to see you on Monday to learn more about Andrew's topic, and we hope to see you then. So have a good day, everyone. Take care.